The next section deals with diet and heart disease. Our dietitian answers many of the questions that people have when they have the diagnosis of heart disease. She'll go through typical things about cholesterol in particular, and also about the types of fats that we should be avoiding, and also how you can achieve some weight loss and achieve the sort of diet that we would like you to be on for people with heart disease.
There are multiple components to a healthy diet, but as a lot of dietitians say, really it is balance and variety. So it's not cutting out, there are 5 food groups, as probably most people know. It's very important to have a balanced diet with all of the 5 food groups. And within those 5 food groups, obviously there are healthier choices and less healthy choices. So if we're going to look at dairy, for instance, the healthy choice would be, the low-fat varieties, because the dairy products contain animal fats, which are, a lot of people know, are not as good for our heart. So variety, moderation. I guess if we're looking at the key factors for our diet, the number one thing, in my opinion, and probably of the Heart Foundation as well, is to reduce our saturated fat, so the fat that comes from animal sources. We also want to have a diet high in fibre, low in salt, lots of fruits and vegetables, whole grain breads and cereals, water as our main drink, that type of thing. So just the very general recommendations that everybody says to do, but that a lot of people don't actually follow to the letter. There's good evidence that everybody can eat more fruits and vegetables, particular vegetables. The recommendation from the government is to have 2 serves of fruit and 5 serves of vegetables per day. A lot of people don't know what that actually means. Some people think that it means, 5 serves of vegetables. I've had people say to me, well, I've had a cherry tomato and a small stick of celery and an olive. I had some lettuce in my salad and some cucumber on my sandwich. So I've had my five vegetables for the day. But what people don't actually realise is that it's 5 serves of vegetables. And a serve is half a cup of cooked vegetables or a cup of salad, sort of raw vegetables. So if you think about over the day, you leave all your vegetables for dinner time and you haven't really bothered to have any yet, you're left with 2.5 cups of cooked veggies or 5 cups of salad to contend with, which is an awful lot. So it's sort of, that message from the government teaches us that we need to put it back into our day. So we might have, some sliced tomato or some mushrooms for breakfast. We might have a small salad or some salad in our sandwich for lunchtime. So by the time we get to dinner, we've sort of, given ourselves a helping hand a little bit in terms of getting all of our vegetables and fruit in. Fruit makes an excellent snack. A lot of people aren't really sure what types of healthy snacks to have, and they often overlook fruits and vegetables. There are good fats and bad fats. There are the fats that come from our animal sources, and they're called saturated fats and also trans fats, so you may have heard of these terms before. And there are unsaturated fats as well. So the saturated fats are the ones that we call the bad fats, and that's because they're sticky and they actually stick to our arteries and blood vessels. And over time, what they can do is actually clog up our arteries and blood vessels. And if they clog them up completely and they're around our heart, we can have a heart attack. And if they clog up our carotid arteries, we can have a stroke. So it's very dangerous. So what we want to do is try and keep the levels of animal fats in our diet low. The good fats usually come from plants, so there are polyunsaturated, our monounsaturated fats, also our sort of omega-3 and 6s, which do fall under the polyunsaturated fats. And they're what we call the good fats. So over time, they actually take away some of that fatty layer very, very slowly over time and help to clear our arteries and blood vessels. What people don't realise is that all fats are the same in terms of the kilojoule content. So some people, I have a very good friend who cooks pancakes, and she gets her olive oil and she goes, look, sloshes in the pan, good fat, it's good for me. And people consider that, the more good fat I'm having, the better, but it's not really like that if you're trying to control your weight, because all fat is the same in terms of kilojoules. So if you have a cup of olive oil and a cup of butter, yes, they're going to have different actions on the heart, but they're going to make you put on the same amount of weight. And of course, being overweight is a risk factor for our heart, and then we get the negative cycle about going back the other way. So we do still need to keep in mind the overall fat as well as just what type of fat we're eating. So there are two different sources of cholesterol. So you can get cholesterol that's manufactured in our liver, and some people's liver does manufacture a lot of cholesterol. These people may need to be on medication. But we've also got dietary cholesterol as well. But a little bit of a myth is that if we eat a lot of dietary cholesterol, our blood cholesterol is going to go up. And actually, it's the saturated fat, which comes from animals, that raises our blood cholesterol level. So the conversion rate from dietary cholesterol to blood cholesterol isn't necessarily as efficient as it is with saturated fat. So keeping saturated fat low is probably the most important thing we can do for our blood cholesterol. So if we're thinking about eggs, they're quite high in cholesterol. However, that conversion rate means that they're not necessarily going to raise our blood cholesterol by a large amount. So the National Heart Foundation recommends up to 6 eggs per week. Now, you may not want to eat them all in one day, but we are able to eat foods that are higher in cholesterol for that reason. Salt linked up with blood pressure. So if you think about what happens with salt in our body is when we eat a lot of salt, like if you've ever had a very salty pizza, you immediately go looking for water, and that's our body trying to dilute that level of sodium, which is another word for salt, in our blood. So what happens then is we've got a lot of fluid in our blood vessels, and that puts a lot of pressure on our blood vessels as well, and it increases our blood pressure. And an increase in our blood pressure means our heart has to work harder, and it's more of a risk factor for our heart, particularly if it's a chronic thing. It happens over a long period of time. So by reducing salt in our diet, we can help to reduce our blood pressure. Now, a lot of people say, oh, but I really don't like the taste of foods without salt. And yes, there probably are a few foods that, everybody's got their food that they like salt on. For me, it's, hot chips. I just don't think they taste the same without salt. Some people it's tomato, some people it's egg. It is okay to have a small amount of salt, but what we need to remember is we're actually born for a taste preference for sugar. The salt taste is acquired, so just like we can acquire it, we can unacquire it as well. So it takes about 3 to 6 weeks for our taste buds to really adapt to that lower salt. So it's not going to happen that day, but our advice is give it a go, reduce it slowly, and then after about 6 weeks, you'll notice the flavours of your food start coming out, and you can really start to taste it. If we are wanting to have something sugary, there are a number of different things that we can have if we're trying to control our weight. The first of them being having a healthy snack that does taste sweeter, like our fruit or our yogurt. And a lot of people say, oh, but fruit's got fruit sugar in it. A lot of people don't realise that just like all salts are the same, all sugars are the same as well. So, like, oh, I'm putting honey in my tea and that's healthier for me. Well, no matter whether it's, sugar or treacle or molasses or table sugar or brown sugar, they're all the same. They're all digested and absorbed in the same biochemical pathway. They all contribute to our weight in exactly the same way. So, although, yes, fruit does have fructose, which is fruit sugar, fruit also contains vitamins, minerals, nutrients, antioxidants, lots of cancer-fighting compounds. It's very good for us. So if we're looking for something sweet, we could have fruit, or we could have something like a yogurt or a low-fat custard, something like that. The question is, what about artificial sweeteners? And a lot of people feel that artificial sweeteners cause cancer. Now, there was a study done back in the 70s where they actually injected aspartame into the brains of rats and they got cancer. But a lot of people argue that if you concentrate and inject anything into anyone's brain, they'll get cancer. And that study since then hasn't been replicated. So I actually wrote to FSANZ, so the Food Standards of Australia and New Zealand, as well as the Cancer Council, asking for their position statement on whether artificial sweeteners do cause cancer or not. And they wrote back saying that the Australian artificial sweeteners are safe for consumption in moderate amounts, and there's no evidence that they do cause cancer. So the recommendations for that are the equivalent of a 60-kilo person having up to 12 cans of artificially sweetened soft drink every day over a lifetime. That's the safe upper limit. So not very many people would actually have that amount of artificial sweetener, but it shows us that it is safe and it is acceptable, particularly in patients who may have diabetes, who are trying to control their blood sugar levels quite tightly. That if they're wanting a little bit of a sweet taste, the artificial sweeteners are an acceptable and safe alternative. Fish contains, particularly the deep sea fish, contains a compound called omega-3, which is one of our good fats. And omega-3 is excellent for not only our brain and nerve and muscle function, but also our cardiac health as well. The recommendations from the National Heart Foundation are for the general population about 500 milligrams of omega-3 per day. And for patients who have had a cardiac event, about 1,000 milligrams per day. Now, it's not an exact science like it is with your heart medication. It's in a roundabout sort of, over the week it accumulates, that sort of thing. But the recommendations are 2 to 3 fish meals a week, particularly of your deep sea fish, so your Atlantic salmon and your mackerel and those types of fish that contain higher levels of omega-3. It can be difficult to get enough omega-3 in because I guess if you have high triglycerides, which is a circulating fat in our bloodstream, omega-3 can really help with that as well. So it may end up that you're taking a lot of omega-3. A lot of people do say, I don't like fish. If you don't like fish, we do recommend that you do take fish oil supplements. So you can get them either in capsule or oil form. It doesn't matter which one. But if you are taking a lot, it sometimes can be easier to take the oil so you're not taking 50 different capsules. Some people like to float a little bit of orange juice on the top so that when you shot it, it gets rid of that fishy taste. Some people like to mix it into their tuna and put it on their sandwich so you can't taste it as much. What you need to be aware of, though, if you're reading and it says on the box 1,000 milligrams of fish oil, that does not necessarily mean that you've got 1,000 milligrams of omega-3. What that means is that there's one meal in that capsule. To find the level of omega-3, you actually need to turn it over and look for 2 acronyms. One is EPA and the other one is DHA. Now, they stand for very long words, which we don't need to know. But next to those acronyms comes a number. So it may be DHA 180 milligrams and EPA 120 milligrams. So they're the 2 different types of omega-3. So you need to add those 2 numbers together. So in this case, DHA plus EPA will equal 300, and that's the amount of omega-3 you're getting. So say we're recommending 1,000 milligrams of omega-3, we may take 3, which will give you 900 milligrams, or you may decide to take 4 if you haven't had any fish for a few days. And that will help you to get enough omega-3. Talking about plant sterols, a lot of people say, do they really work? The answer is yes, they do, and there is good evidence that they work, sometimes as effectively as some of the cholesterol-lowering medications. And how they work is plant sterols actually have the same molecular structure as cholesterol. So what happens in our bloodstream is if we can get the number of circulating plant sterol molecules up to a level where it's sort of saturated, it means that that our body actually absorbs the plant sterol instead of the cholesterol molecule, and the cholesterol molecule is taken out of our body. We do need cholesterol for a lot of our body's natural processes, so the production of estrogen, testosterone, adrenaline, which is that hormone where somebody comes up behind you and goes, rah, and scares you. That actually uses cholesterol as well, and also in the manufacturing of vitamin D in our skin when we go out in the sun as well. So in using those processes, our body needs cholesterol, so it takes it from our bloodstream, thereby lowering our blood cholesterol level. So if we're not absorbing it and we're using it up from our bloodstream, our blood cholesterol level is lowered. So the advantage of plant sterols is that they are safe. So what they actually do is plant sterols are found naturally in a lot of our plants, but in small amounts, not therapeutic levels. So they concentrate it and they put it into certain products, such as some of the margarines, the yogurts, the milks that are available in our supermarkets. So when we're talking about plant sterol enriched products, we're talking only those that are specifically labelled for that cholesterol lowering purpose. The catch is we need a certain amount per day. So 3 serves is what we're wanting per day. And one serve is 2 teaspoons of the cholesterol-lowering margarine, or we might have 1 serve of the cholesterol-lowering yogurt. Another example of a serve would be a cup of the cholesterol-lowering milk. So if we're thinking about our day, before we had the milks and yogurts, it could be quite difficult because we're relying on 6 teaspoons of margarine. Now, if you're a person who doesn't normally have a lot of margarine, we're then adding 6 teaspoons of fat into our diet. And remember that all fats are the same. And then our weight's likely to increase, which then is a risk factor for our heart, and it goes back the other way. But what we have now is this luxury of having the milks and yogurts. So a typical day may be you might have cereal and you might have a cup of milk on your cereal, so that's 1 serve. At morning tea, you might have a pot of the cholesterol-lowering yogurt, which is a 2nd serve, and on your sandwich at lunchtime, you might have 1 teaspoon of each of the of margarine on each slice, and there you've got your 3 serves. An important consideration is that the cholesterol-lowering molecule of the sterol is a similar structure to our beta-carotene antioxidant molecule, and we want to make sure we have enough antioxidants. So if you are going to include plant sterols in your diet, it is important to also have at least 1 yellow or orange fruit or vegetable extra serve per day. Everybody likes antioxidants because what are they in? They're in red wine, they're in tea, they're in chocolate. So a lot of people say, does that mean I can eat a whole block of chocolate because it's got a lot of antioxidants in it? If you're thinking about a block of chocolate though, what else does chocolate have in it? Saturated fat, sugar, calories, and very little other nutrition. So I guess what people overlook when they're thinking about antioxidants is the biggest, the richest source of antioxidants are our fruits and vegetables. So if we're going to look at antioxidants in our fruits and vegetables, one of my recommendations is always have a look at the actual fruit or vegetable. So have you ever cut a capsicum in half, or looked at a bunch of lettuce that was dark green, or the capsicum's brightly red? Usually, if the fruit or vegetable is really intensely coloured, that indicates that it has a high level of antioxidants in it. So the other really important thing with antioxidants is that at this point in time in science, there is no evidence that taking antioxidant supplements is a useful thing to do. So if you go to your health food store, you can have a look at all of these antioxidant supplements, but there is no evidence that any of this works. It appears from the evidence that antioxidants work in concert with all the other nutrients in our food. So having a balance and variety and lots of fruits and vegetables are the best way to get antioxidants, which of course can really help lower our risk factor for our heart and also cancer and other chronic diseases. You don't need to change your entire diet. We're not going to give you a meal plan that says you must have all bran for breakfast, fruit for lunch, and 1 piece of chicken for dinner. It's about adapting your own diet that you're already having a look through your diet with all the available information given to you, having a good read through everything that you've been given on diet, and realising how you can make small changes to make your diet healthier. So it may be swapping, say you have, a litre of Coke per day. Well, that's a lot of sugar. There are many different options. Yes, you could have water, but you may also, choose a Diet Coke or a Coke Zero, or if you were cooking with cream, you may choose to use light and creamy evaporated milk. So it's about looking at what you can substitute without feeling like you're missing out on the fun of eating, because obviously, most of us live to eat. So the government campaign at the moment, the little, swap this for that, is a very good campaign because it shows us that, minor changes over a whole year can add up to being healthier, losing weight, without feeling like you're having to change your entire lifestyle to something that's unsustainable. There are 2 different types of fibre. There are soluble fibre and insoluble fibre. The soluble fibre is sort of, your oats and legumes and more digestible type foods, and your insoluble fibres like your nuts and seeds and the outside skins and casings of your fruits and vegetables and things that tend to move through more undigested. So you don't really need to get caught up in the types, but we do need to know that fibre is very good for not only our heart, but our blood cholesterol level, our weight, because it keeps us fuller for longer, and a whole range of different things, and particularly our bowel health as well. So with our insoluble fibre, what it does is it actually, when we eat it, it goes through and it absorbs 3 times its own weight in fluid, and it actually acts like sort of a sponge or a broom. When it goes through our intestine, it sweeps the inside sort of lining of our intestines. And I guess in terms of people say eating fibre can reduce your risk of bowel cancer, it does that if there's a bowel cancer cell, and you're not eating enough fibre, and it can sit there and it can actually multiply and metastasize, so break off and move around our body and get stuck in different other organs, and you can be in big trouble. But if you are eating a lot of fibre, it can actually come and sort of sweep that away and take it out of your body, and we're safe. So regular fibre is very important. And with soluble fibre, it actually can bind our cholesterol, take it out of our body, and obviously we still need cholesterol for our other bodily function, so that it takes that out of our bloodstream, thereby lowering our blood cholesterol level. So it is important to eat lots of fruits and vegetables, whole grain breads and cereals. People ask about which sort of bread do I eat. Obviously, bread can be high in fibre or low in fibre. A lot of people say, and my best friend says, "Oh, do I have to eat that Bergen bread?" I always say for that question, well, if you like the taste of it, because life's too short to be eating. There are so many beautiful foods that life is too short to be eating foods that you don't like the taste of. But if you can handle breads like Bergen bread, they're very, very dense, they're very high in fibre, and they're very good for us. So a good indication of the fibre level of your bread is to actually do the physical test, where you pick up the loaf of bread and you see how heavy it is. So those country split loaves that are very sort of light and fluffy white bread, you can almost play volleyball with it, they're so light. So you see me standing in the supermarket going, oh, this one's probably, if you're not going to be reading labels, you can sort of figure out how heavy it is. But probably the recommendations in order, the least useful would be just your normal white bread. After that, you've got your white high fibre bread. Now, some of those white breads are getting quite good at putting fibre into their bread as well, so they can be quite useful. A lot of people don't like eating the darker breads, so what I say for those is to choose a very high fibre white bread, put it on the top of your sandwich, and if you can manage a piece of whole grain or wholemeal bread underneath, you can sort of trick yourself into having a little bit healthier sandwich. Then you've got your wholemeal, which is your white bread with your grains in it. Then we've got these new ones that have come out recently, which are your wholemeal bread, which is just the actual seed that's been milled up and made into the flour. So your body does less work, really, breaking down the seeds, and it's a little bit less fibre, but it's still useful. But you've got the wholemeal whole grain as well, which are probably the gold standard. And then you've got your dark, your heavy Bergens, which are excellent for fibre. So it's a personal preference, really, but there are definitely levels of recommendations for the breads. A lot of breakfast cereals actually should probably be in the confectionery aisle. They've got so much sugar in them and so little fibre. Some of our best breakfast cereals probably are your sort of wheat-based sort of biscuit products, like Wheat Bix, Vita Brits, that type of thing. Your porridge and oats. So oats have soluble fibre in them, which are very good for our cholesterol levels. So Wheat Bix, porridge, and obviously your brands and things are very good as well. And I often get a screwed up face when I recommend your brands because they do taste like the box they come in. So sometimes a good alternative, if you do have a favourite cereal, is to mix a little bit of bran in with it as a bit of a compromise, because they are very high in fibre as well, and they keep us fuller for longer, which is the benefit of fibre. Reading labels is very important because it is a tool for our health. So these products are trying to sell, these companies are trying to sell their product by putting a slogan on the front saying, this food is healthy for you. But if we actually know how to turn the product over and read the labels ourselves, it's a much better thing. So what we need to know is all the different names for fat, salt, sugar, and fibre in our ingredients list. So knowing that is very important because they can split up sugars. So they might, instead of saying sugar as the first ingredient, why would they want to do that? Nobody would buy it, or people might, but they would put sucrose, maltose, lactose, fructose, dextrose, all the way through the ingredients list. So if you didn't know all those names meant sugar, you wouldn't realise how much sugar was in there. So that's the ingredients list. And it is important to note that ingredients list is listed in order of weight, including water. So the first 3 ingredients generally characterise the food. It's also, they'll often put a percentage as well. So like say it's strawberry jam, they'll say what percentage of strawberries are in the jam. They also have to write where the food comes from. So is it Turkish apricots or are they Australian apricots? So that can be quite useful as well in figuring out sort of the origins of our food if we're interested in that. The other very important thing is the nutritional information panel. So that's that little table on the back that looks like gibberish to most of us. It's quite difficult to interpret, but there are really 3 or 4 main key points to look at in that nutritional information panel. So the 3 main things that we look at are fat, sugar, and salt, particularly if you have high blood pressure. Another useful thing to look at is fibre if it's on there, although it doesn't always have to be on there. If it's not on there, we just assume that there's not very much fibre in the product, otherwise they'd be wanting to advertise it, wouldn't they? So there are some numbers we need to remember for label reading that are very easy. So for fat and sugar, we always look at the per 100 because the information is expressed as per serve as well as per 100, but the per 100 they all have, so it's directly comparable. So if we're thinking about, say for the per serve, the reason that's not useful is because I might eat a bowl of cereal that's this big, but my dad might eat a bowl of cereal that's this big. So per serve, if they say, 50 grams, well, that's irrelevant because everybody eats a different amount. With a block of chocolate, their idea of per serve is 10 grams, which is 1 piece of chocolate. Well, who eats 1 piece of chocolate and then puts the block away? I don't know anybody that does that. So the reason we look at per 100 grams is because we can directly compare. So for fat, we're looking at less than 10 grams per 100, so 10%. For sugar, we're looking for the same thing, less than 10 grams per 100. So if there were 2 numbers that you could remember, they're fairly easy really, aren't they? For sodium, it's less than 400 milligrams. And for fibre, we want more than 5 to 6 grams per 100. So if we've got all 4 of those, it's an excellent angel of a product and we should eat it all the time.